I'm Gwen Lufkin. I'm a director of consumer insights and research here at Harmelin. I've been with the company just shy of 5 years. As Connor, Joe, and Ashley demonstrated, we've been keeping our eyes on the rapidly developing area of generative AI. And on the research side, what we've been especially interested in is the consumer perspective. There have been several studies and surveys released in recent months that help us understand how consumers are engaging with these new tools and what their initial feelings are when it comes to generative AI in general. What's important to keep in mind is although the hype is high right now, it's so early in the process, things are still maturing. So the pulse that we're taking of the consumers right now is still in that beginning phase of things, but we're keeping an eye as things mature to see if the trends we're seeing now hold true or if things kind of start to change. So this first chart is looking at the primary users of generative AI. And right now, it's probably who you'd expect them to be. So according to an eMarketer survey from June, the primary users fall into the 18 to 44 age range. And the chart we've included here is in millions. So you can see we're not talking huge numbers, but these are the initial readings when looking at early adoption. And while it's not included in this chart, the other thing worth pointing out is that the primary users also currently skew male. So as we continue to monitor generative AI trends, we want to keep an eye on the demographics of those adopting the technology to understand if it remains concentrated within the Gen Z millennial group, and also to monitor that male skew to see if the trend continues as generative AI evolves or if we see any shifts as it matures. So Ashley already talked about the idea of AI-powered or enhanced search and some of the interesting experiments being done there, but we wanted to look at how consumers are viewing it. So according to a Morning Consult survey from September, we're seeing that interest in AI-powered online search peaked around March, and it's kind of plateaued or even headed in a slightly downward trend since then. Over the next couple months, as we start to see more experiments from Google and Bing, we're interested to see how consumer behavior changes, to see if they start approaching search differently. Ultimately, for us, this could change how we go to market with our own advertising strategies. Joe and Connor already kind of touched on the sense of trust or misinformation associated with generative AI. So while it's still early, we're seeing some trust issues that users are having because the entire basis, as Connor kind of went through, it's backed by probability. So it's not an actual response to a question or an actual response to a specific search. Some of the content that can be returned is false or inaccurate, which is kind of the Achilles heel right now for generative AI as it stands. It's the quality of the response that you're getting and the usefulness of it. So we're really monitoring that level of trust and using that as an indicator of adoption. If trust begins to increase, we would expect to see adoption increase as well. Something we thought was helpful when we try to understand was the expectations consumers already have regarding their own interactions with AI. So this is from a Forbes survey from July, and you can see 40% of respondents expect to interact with AI in the form of personalized advertising, which obviously impacts us directly. The idea that consumers already have this expectation that because these tools exist, they should in turn benefit the relevance of their advertising brings us back to a lot of the points Ashley was mentioning around Microsoft and what they're currently doing with Bing. It also helps us understand what consumers want or expect to see in the advertising we're putting out there. And then the last thing we wanted to point out was how consumers say they're currently using AI. The thing that we found most interesting here is if we think back to what 2 slides ago, we can see that trust is kind of diminishing when it comes to generative AI. But according to this survey, about 43% of respondents say they're using it to answer financial questions. So while there's mistrust, people are still using it. Another 38% say they use generative AI to help plan their travel itinerary. So these are a few areas where we know consumer behavior starts to change, and as it changes, people might go a different direction to get their information, and it impacts ultimately how we interact with them from an advertising and marketing standpoint. So these were just 2 areas that stood out, especially given some of our clients we have in these categories. And while this probably resonates with some of you on the call, it's also an indication that consumers start to realize the power of generative AI. We might find ourselves chasing them into new territory.